Okay, so it's time to talk a little bit about economics, things that are going on in Canada with that regard, that people should probably be aware of because it's definitely going to be affecting us down the road. So since Chrystia Freeland has got in, there's talk about in her announcement to make people eligible to collect employment insurance benefits for 6 months after only working 120 hours, or 40 Friday nights in a man named Kelly's case, when he was talking about what it was like when he started out in the workforce. So she's making it really easy for people to collect CERB right now. It doesn't matter how you get to that 120 hours, whether you bang it out quick or not. If you end up going on unemployment, it can guarantee you 6 months of unemployment. So that's something that some people are concerned about, that it could turn into a really bad thing. One of them including Jack Mintz, who is president of the Fellow of the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, calls the changes really, really bad policy with all kinds of disastrous unintended consequences. I would argue that they might be intended consequences. He also goes on to state the federal Liberals do not care how much anything costs, and it shows. I would agree with that. He also goes on to say, when you make it too easy, it's not good for society. Maybe this is their way of moving towards guaranteed annual income. So despite him saying unintended consequences, he also has concerns that this is something that could be implemented to encourage people to accept a new norm that essentially looks like communism. They're not calling it that, but that's essentially what we're driving towards, and that's what I'm reporting on today through all of the things that I've put together to talk about in regards to this. He goes on to say again, Mintz points out that CERB doesn't discriminate between full and part-time work. So I could be working 10 hours a week and I get the same payment, $2,000 a month, as someone who is working full-time. No wonder people don't want to go back to work. And I would agree with that 100%. So it's an easy vacation for a lot of people right now. The money's already taken out. We're heading towards the big debt that we're going to have to face next year. And he says in response to that, people forget we're going to have deficits next year and the year after, and people do not realize the hole that we are digging and the fact that we are going to be making economic recovery that much harder to do with the way things are right now. And I mean really meaning that we're already on a projection rate to have a debt that is greater than what we had at the end of 10 years of depression and 5 years of war. So adding all this other stuff to it, along with the compound interest that it'll cost to take it out, is going to be putting us into a really bad spot by next year. So people really ought to be careful about how they're spending their money right now, what they're doing with any of their investments right now, and whether or not they're sitting on the couch waiting to see if they should get a job when their coverage is up, or if they should go and try to get a job right now, anything that they can get, because it's going to be a game of musical chairs pretty soon. And when the crunch is on and you don't have a job and the coverage is up, you're really going to be hurting, right? So that's the thing that people probably should be worried about. Another thing the article mentions is a kid who goes to his physiotherapist, and the physiotherapist tells him that he wants him to put the payment a week later so that he can still collect on his CERB, so he's not over $1,000. And so you can see that there's corruption even from people who would normally make good money, that maybe because they aren't right now, or it's easier to go to the beach a few days and collect CERB and then just go and treat a few people, that, they're not helping with any of this. They're contributing to it. So, and he also goes on to say that he's heard of numerous businesses, owners that are saying they're working 12-hour days in their coffee shop or other small business because they can't find people willing to work because of CERB. People are on their coverage right now, and no one wants to go back to work at a job that they'd get paid roughly the same and perhaps less than the $2,000 a month. So this is implemented in a manner that it's definitely going to flatten out the wage expectations and things like that after this all settles. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So that's more or less that. Now, things that are interesting in this other article regarding Freeland is she put it in her inaugural news conference, COVID-19 offers a fabulous opportunity for our country to craft an equity That means everyone gets the same. And green recovery. So that'll mean people will probably be shut down as much as possible on carbon emissions, and how they plan on doing that is probably going to be boosting that carbon tax through the roof. And then we're going to have all kinds of other taxes we're going to have to deal with over all the money that we've borrowed this year because of COVID. This echoed Trudeau's own promise to get through this pandemic in a way that gives everyone a real and fair chance of success, not just the wealthiest 1%. And so again, it's kind of talking about trying to flatten out all of the capitalist wage earners into, say, get rid of that middle class aspect where it gets squeezed, so lower and middle class kind of blend together, and then you will always be left with the rich plutocrats at the top. So a book she writes. So that's a refrain increasingly heard all over the globe as the pandemic accelerates a surge of income inequality that began decades ago. For Freeland, it has long been a source of great concern. In 2012, she penned Plutocrats, a book that examines the growing divide between rich and poor and helped put her on Trudeau's radar. So it's her book, and how to redistribute wealth is essentially what it is. Making her vision a reality will mean using her consensus building skills to parry resistance from business. So they're calling consensus building skills. That's her public relations skills. That's her propaganda ability. Bear in mind, she used to be a journalist, so she's well versed in the words required to tell a story to get people to believe in the way you want them to believe in it. So to parry resistance from businesses, provincial governments, and a wing of the Liberal caucus that's very wary of huge deficits. So she's certainly planning on going in like a tank that's going to resist all resistance to her crazy spending that she wants to do. Another thing that caught my eye about her and her book that she writes. Freeland, while not ultra-wealthy, has been part of that same globe-trotting elite since her career as an editor at the Reuters news service at the Financial Times. Her book's acknowledgments, Plutocrats. Her book's acknowledgments include Eric Schmidt, George Soros, Jeff Immelt, and David Rubenstein on a list of people who helped me to understand their world and have become friends. So if she's becoming friends with George Soros after she understands his world, I wouldn't expect anything good to come from her, despite all of the nice words that she's using to try to say she's going to create some sort of utopia for us. So she's really just picking up the reins on the agenda that certain members of the Liberal Party are very much attached to right now. I would even add, and I've mentioned this before, Julie Payette, the current Governor General, who gave him exactly what he wanted and probably, in my opinion, isn't going to give Aaron O'Toole his chance at becoming Prime Minister this year. I doubt that if there is a vote of non-confidence that goes through, I doubt she'll call an election. So that's my prediction solidly for that at this point. So we'll just have to see what happens in about another, little less than 3 weeks. Plutocrats. So this is her book, and this is the review on her book. So we'll go over this quickly and then try to disseminate discern what the words mean. In the last few decades, what it means to be rich has changed dramatically. For the 1%, it's the wealthiest 0.01% who are fast outpacing the rest of us. Today's colossal fortunes are amassed by the diligent toiling of smart, perceptive businessmen who see themselves as deserving victors in a cutthroat international competition. Cracking open this tight-knit world is Chrystia Freeland, an acclaimed business journalist. At ease in Davos or Dubai, Freeland has reported on the lives and minds of these new super elites for nearly a decade. As I said, she also highly respects them and has made friends with them. Grounding her interviews in the economics and history of modern capitalism, she provides examples of the new wealth and its consequences. She showcases the $3 million birthday party of a New York financier months before the financial meltdown, details the closed-door 2005 SEC meeting where the U.S. government allowed investment banks to write their own regulatory laws, and tells how the Bank of Canada's Mark Carney became a key figure in the central battle between the plutocracy and the rest of us. So she says the rest of us, and I don't know if she necessarily believes that or not. So bringing us to Mark Carney. Who is Mark Carney? Well, Mark Carney is a banker who's worked for Goldman Sachs for 13 years. So he's spent his time with the global banking cabal for over a decade. And after that time, he became deputy governor of the Bank of Canada for some time. And he also ended up going over to, where is that? He also ends up going over to being in charge, there it is, the governor of, oh, well, that's the Bank of Canada. He also ends up being in charge of the British, there it is, the governor of the Bank of England as well. So he's governed banks to do with 2 colonies, as well as running the one bank, or helping guide one of the banks that we all owe. So he's a banker, basically, I guess, in what people might call the cabal, in my opinion. So he's also very anti-Brexit. He didn't want that to go through at all. To me, that means he doesn't want anybody slipping out from underneath the euro, which is eventually going to merge up as one of the few currencies in the world. And that's something he's actually working on right now, is trying to create a new currency that will affect the US dollar, essentially, in order to combat it as the means of money in which most global operations are dealt with. So that sort of brings us to here. Speaking only hours after U.S. President Donald Trump had posted on Twitter that he blamed the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's policies creating fears of an economic recession, and then threatened China with some more retaliatory tariffs, Carney urged central banks to work together to replace the U.S. dollar as reserve currency. He cautioned against choosing another new hegemonic reserve currency like the renminbi, and suggested instead a new synthetic hegemonic currency such as Libra, which could potentially be provided through a network of central bank digital currencies that would decrease the U.S. dollar's domineering influence on trade worldwide. So he's essentially talking about using another money cryptocurrency to try to drag down the U.S. dollar's value. So how is he doing that? He's doing that through a group called Libra. What is Libra? Libra is the permissioned blockchain digital currency proposed by the American social society company Facebook Incorporated. So this is Facebook's cryptocurrency that's set to try to create a competition for the U.S. petrodollar to bring it down. So where did I have? I thought I had some points on that I highlighted. Where are we doing? Essentially what it wants to do is it wants to use other currencies that are already in existence to link up with them, and as their backing, as well as to have $10 million from everyone who's in on it to create the first base for money to be borrowed off of. So anyone who invests in that, anyone who ends up owing any of the money on that money, they're all going to be making money on that. So some of the people who actually left the Libra Association in 2019 are eBay, MasterCard, Stripe, Visa, and Mercado Pago. But Visa has also stated the only reason why they're out for now is because they want to make sure that everything is solid before they get on board, and it could be the same with the rest of these companies as well. So that's some of the bad things that we could be heading towards with money, is that Facebook themselves are looking to dominate the money industry, and because they also dominate the news industry in the sense that they have the ability to block certain political opinions from being formed or existing, and they're interested in making this money to help take down the US dollar. And these people are all kind of working in tandem with the United Nations and the World Banks together. This, to me, is what your New World Order money system is going to look like. These are the people that are forming it. So anyway, that's something y'all can be concerned about. Next year's going to be a really hard year, I think, for everybody. So, and it's not going to stop. I think that we'll see more people essentially on government welfare, and it could last a long time. I was talking about some of the things that were similar in the 1930s to now. Well, that's one of the things that happened, was there was all these people, I think something like 40% of Canadians were on government subsidy for a period of like 7 years. During that 10 years of depression. So we could be heading towards some pretty strange times where they try to make something like that stick. So anyway, that's where I'll leave that for the economic end of things with Freeland and where things could be going for Canada with our money. And to talk about Eric O'Toole, because I guess I said I would. Well, I mean, he just got done running his election. You try to find some of his older news and things that he's talked about. one of the things that stands out at me over that is that he's a big fan of regulation. So he's all about, I guess, what you could call government fascism, where they want to be able to control a lot of aspects of business before it even happens, and they get to say who gets to do what, when, where, sign all the documents, pay all the fees before you can start your business. I think he's going to be something like a Harper 2.0. He's going to be like another conservative globalist, claims to be conservative, but he'll allow things like foreign workers to come in, which is actually a conservative thing. And I mean, my heart goes out to people around the world who just want to come and make more money. I understand there's a lot of people suffering because of that kind of thing, but it kind of seems anti-conservative to start the foreign trade worker program, which kind of eliminated the competitive aspect for business, for people to hire from locals. You end up with people that are on contract for less money than you'd have to pay locals, and it eliminates the business. So that's all thanks to the conservative government. So again, he's kind of like this pretend conservative, and he's going to have some beyond liberal, like I say, globalist leanings. He supports Israel heavily. He makes a big point of that. It's the democracy in the Middle East that needs to be preserved is kind of the catch with that, which is normal enough. It also ends up meaning that he's going to support Saudi Arabia, because anyone who doesn't know, Saudi Arabia is actually allied with Israel right now. There's a truce between them, and they're sort of working, I guess, in a sense together, mainly Saudi Arabia, though, to fight the conflict in Yemen against the Houthis. The Houthis are Shiite Muslims. Saudi Arabia is Sunni Muslims, so they don't have any problems fighting each other because they each think that they're the ones responsible for carrying on the Quran and the lineage of Muhammad. So they're at war with each other. He'll support that. He'll keep selling weapons to Saudi Arabia in that regard. Another interesting thing about him is that he was also pro-choice, and that didn't stop him from winning the election, even on the conservative side, which might give people an indication that it's not a huge majority of conservatives that really care about whether you're pro-life or not, because it wasn't enough to alienate him from the vote. My suggestion on why that would be is that although conservatives get aligned with being quite religious, no matter what religion it is, that there's still also a lot of atheists, and they would rather see their life carry on unaffected by children if they could, or whatever, if it seems like it'd be a detriment to them. So there's a lot of conservatives who don't look at life the same way as maybe some people do, and it's not enough to make them change their minds either in that regard. So one thing that concerns me about him is that he's another Easterner who claims to have essentially what I would consider to be Western interests at heart. In regard to trying to get work to be stimulated and things like that, the conservatives really don't have a lot of power to do that other than deregulating and trying to allow people to be interested. But when the oil dollar also affects that, that's going to be a big contributing factor. One thing I talk about occasionally is that the whole time that Canada was booming like crazy during our oil boom that lasted some 13 years is it was largely in lockstep with the Iraqi and Afghanistan war. And once those efforts were pulled out was roughly when our oil infrastructure creation ended. And that's mostly what was going on, is infrastructure creation. And so some of the things that resulted from that is there were more refineries in Alberta than there are now. Some of them have been turned into compressor stations. And these great big refineries now just knock some of the things out of the oil and then keep on piping it down to the States, where they clean it up the rest of the way and then sell it back to us. And a lot of those companies that invested in the infrastructure creation in Alberta, Canada at the time were American companies. So you can see how it didn't really work for us in the long run. And I think it will take another war in order to bring that stuff back, until the United States needs to put fuel in tanks, Humvees, helicopters, planes, ships, etc., as well as supplying fuel for their 350 million population. There isn't really going to be any need for Canadian oil field to come back. So he might talk about the economy and trying to bring it back and get it on track, but he's going to be limited to a degree with that, depending on what happens geopolitically. Aside from those things about him, I'm not really going to say too much because he's just gone through his election phase. So we'll see all the things that he starts doing as running the Conservative Party of Canada now that he's in the seat of it. We'll just have to wait and see what his true colors are over time. And so I guess that's what all there is to report for Canadian news today. So thanks for sticking with me and listening, and we'll talk to you soon as anything else relevant comes up. Thanks a lot. Bye.